If you sail or cruise along the eastern shore of Lake Michigan, you know about Arcadia. This small town has been welcoming sailors for generations. But back in the day, this was a busy railroad port, and it was a critical stop in the history of Michigan's railroads. Here is its story. In the early 1900s, Arcadia was not a quiet tourist stop on a scenic drive. It was a working port. Steamers came in from Lake Michigan. Trains came down from the inland forests and farms. Wagons waited near the dock. Passengers stepped down in good clothes. Freight moved by hand, by horse, by rail, and by water. The place had the sound of motion. There was the heavy breath of a locomotive near the depot. There was the slap of lake water against pilings. There was the creak of wagons and the talk of dock workers. There was the whistle of a steamer coming through the channel from Lake Michigan into Bar Lake, which many people now know as Lake Arcadia. Arcadia's story begins before the Pere Marquette name appeared on the dock. The first power behind the town was lumber. Henry Starke, a Milwaukee boat builder and businessman, saw value in this Lake Michigan shore. He bought land. He built a pier. He helped lay out a settlement that people once called Starkville. In 1881, the first lumber shipped from the pier. The village lots were sold. Roads were cut through the woods. A narrow-gauge railroad began as a tool of the lumber trade. That is how many Michigan towns began. But Arcadia had one advantage that most lumber villages never had. It sat beside Bar Lake, separated from Lake Michigan by sand. If that lake could be reached by large vessels, Arcadia could become more than a sawmill town. In 1893, that changed. A new channel connected Bar Lake to Lake Michigan. The harbor gave ships a safer place to enter and tie up than the open Lake Michigan shore. The old pier into Lake Michigan lost its role. The new harbor became the center of town commerce. For Arcadia, the channel was the turning point. It meant that a steamer did not have to lie exposed in open water while men wrestled with lumber and freight. It meant that passengers could arrive in town more safely. It meant that lumber, farm goods, and manufactured products could move with greater regularity. Then came the railroad connection. The Arcadia and Betsey River Railway began as a lumber road. It was later converted toward standard gauge and extended inland. By 1895, it reached Henry, where it connected with the Chicago and West Michigan Railway. By 1896, it had reached Copemish, where it linked Arcadia to still more rail routes. This was a small railroad, but it had a large job. It moved timber, supplies, mail, passengers, crops, and manufactured goods. It made Arcadia a working junction between the forest, the farm, the factory, and the lake. In 1900, the Chicago and West Michigan Railway became part of the Pere Marquette Railroad system. That made Arcadia's local movement part of a larger rail network. A crate, a trunk, a barrel, or a load of finished goods could move from Arcadia to inland Michigan, to larger ports, or into a market far away. The dock became the place where those routes met. One of the best remembered vessels tied to this trade was the steamer Arcadia. It had been built from local timbers and planking cut in Arcadia and shipped to Milwaukee for construction. The vessel hauled lumber from the Starke Land Lumber Company sawmill to Chicago, Wisconsin, and other Lake Michigan ports. That is a striking fact. Arcadia sent its own timber away to build a ship, then used that ship to carry more Arcadia lumber across the lake. In that arrangement, Arcadia was not simply shipping raw material. It was building the tools of its own commerce. But the town did not stand still. In 1906, the Starke sawmill burned. For many lumber towns, a mill fire marked the beginning of decline. Arcadia took a different turn. Charles Starke, Henry Starke's son, helped replace the lost mill economy with the Arcadia Furniture Company. The new factory produced bedroom furniture and fine veneers. Local history accounts say the furniture reached large retail markets, including Macy's in New York. That shift changed the meaning of the dock. Before the fire, the dock had been a lumber outlet. After the fire, it helped support manufacturing. Wood still moved, but so did finished goods. Arcadia was no longer only sending boards away, it was sending made products. That is the town's unique industrial story. The dock was more than a pile of planks at the water's edge. It was the hinge between two economic ages, lumber and furniture. The Pere Marquette steamers made that hinge visible. Vessels such as Pere Marquette No. 6 and Pere Marquette No. 8 stopped at Arcadia. These were not the great railcar ferries that made Ludington famous. Arcadia's service was more intimate. It was freight, passengers, and local trade. Goods still had to be handled. People still had to wait. Baggage still had to be moved. That is what makes Arcadia's dock story so human. A steamer's arrival was not just a shipping event. It was a town event. People gathered. Wagons came down to the water. Men loaded freight. Women waited in long dresses. Children watched the smoke and the gangplank. A little store near the dock sold ice cream, postcards, and candy. That small storefront may seem minor. It is not. It tells us that the dock was also a place of memory. People bought postcards there because they wanted proof that they had been there. The working harbor had become part of the visitors' Arcadia, too. By the 1910s, Arcadia had 1 foot in industry and 1 foot in tourism. The same dock that served lumber piles and freight also served passengers seeking Lake Michigan air. The same lake that carried cargo also carried summer hopes. The railroad depot added another layer. At the Arcadia depot, steam power met small-town routine. The train brought mail and supplies. It carried people to inland stations. It tied Arcadia to Copemish and Henry, and from there to wider markets. The depot was not just a building, it was a promise that the town was connected. That promise had limits. Arcadia's harbor was always at war with sand. Lake Michigan's shore moves constantly. Channels fill. Piers wear down. Dredging costs money. Private owners built and maintained the harbor first. Federal support began in the early 1900s, but keeping the channel open remained a long-running issue. For a town built on movement, a blocked channel could change everything. Still, for a few decades, Arcadia's system worked. The harbor, dock, railway, factory, and steamers formed a tight machine. Forest products moved out, supplies moved in, people traveled, mail arrived, finished furniture left town for bigger markets. There were names attached to all of this. Henry Starke gave Arcadia its industrial start. Charles Starke helped guide the shift from sawmill to furniture factory. Ann M. Dempster was tied to Arcadia's early post office history. Workers whose names were rarely recorded carried lumber, handled freight, loaded wagons, fired boilers, and kept the schedules moving. History often remembers the owners and vessels. But the dock depended on workers. It depended on people who knew how to shift a load, read the weather, mend a line, fire a boiler, and keep freight moving under pressure. The dock was also part of a larger Michigan pattern. Across the Lake Michigan shore, towns rose where timber, water, and rail met. Some ports faded when the timber was gone. Others reinvented themselves as factory towns, resort towns, or small residential communities. Arcadia did all three, but in its own way. The Pere Marquette docks show that change in one compact place. Look at what passed through them: logs, lumber, furniture, mail, passengers, candy, postcards, baggage, and news. That list tells the story better than any grand claim. It was an economy you could hear and smell. Coal smoke, wet rope, sawdust, lake water, horses, steam. By the late 1930s, the old rail era was ending. The Arcadia and Betsey River Railway was gone or nearly gone. Automobiles and highways changed travel. Trucks changed freight. The harbor's role shifted. The industrial age of the dock faded. But the place did not lose its meaning. Today, Arcadia is known for quiet streets, Lake Michigan views, the harbor, and summer visits. The old industrial sound is gone, yet the town's shape still carries the memory of what happened there. A harbor is never just water. A rail line is never just iron. A dock is never just boards. At Arcadia, the dock was the town's front door to commerce. It let a small village speak to Chicago, Milwaukee, New York, and the rest of Michigan. It let a lumber camp become a factory town. It let residents leave and visitors arrive. It made the village part of the Great Lakes story. That is why the Pere Marquette docks in Arcadia deserve a place in Michigan memory. They remind us that history is often built at transfer points: a dock, a depot, a channel, a loading platform, a place where one kind of motion becomes another. Arcadia was small. Its reach was not. Thanks for listening to The End of the Road in Michigan. Please follow us for future episodes.